I will never forget that moment. The moment when the entire courtroom of the Wayne County Family Court fell so silent I could hear my own heart pounding inside my chest. In that thick, heavy silence, I heard my daughter's clear little voice rise up. "Your Honor, Judge Sanderson, may I show everyone something my mom doesn't know about?" Jada's voice was trembling, but it was so clear that no one in that room could pretend they hadn't heard her. Judge Miriam Sanderson, a middle-aged woman with silver hair neatly pinned up and sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses, slowly lifted her head. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, then she gave a small nod, signaling my daughter to go on. My daughter, Jada, 7 years old, in the navy blue uniform of Lakeshore Academy of Arts, timidly stepped forward. She looked so tiny in that space of dark wood and cold, long benches, yet her hand gripped tightly what she was holding, an old tablet with a screen cracked in several places, the thing I had always assumed she kept only for sentimental reasons. Jada lifted the tablet, took a deep breath, and hit play. As the video started to appear on the court's large screen, I felt like my entire world stopped turning. The air seemed to thicken. Every cell in my body went taut, caught between terror and a fragile strand of hope I didn't even dare to name. But for you to understand why that moment mattered so much, why a shattered tablet in the hands of a 7-year-old child could overturn a judgment that was almost decided, I have to tell you the whole story, the story of a marriage that fell apart, of a man I once loved and trusted more than anyone else in this world, of a scheme calculated down to the smallest detail, step by step, to destroy me, my reputation, my finances, and even my right to be a mother, and of how a small child saved her mother with nothing but a video on that battered old tablet. Let me take you back to that fateful morning, 3 months before the hearing. The morning I truly believed was just another ordinary day, until everything in my life began to collapse. If you're still listening now, stay with me, because everything that happened before the moment Jada walked into that courtroom is what shows you just how far a mother can be pushed to the edge of despair. And from there, you'll understand why my little girl dared to step forward in court and stand up against her own father. I woke up at 5 in the morning, like every day. No alarm clock needed. My body had adjusted itself to an almost perfect cycle after 8 years of being a full-time housewife in this Grosse Pointe mansion. The September dawn light slipped through the curtains, casting a pale golden layer over the large bedroom. Next to me, Malik was still asleep, his back turned toward me, the exact position he had slept in for the past 6 months. I looked at the outline of his shoulder in the dim light, trying to rummage through my memories to recall the last time he held me in his sleep. I couldn't remember. Carefully, I slipped out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold oak floor. From the bed to the bathroom door was 17 steps. I had counted them so many times I could walk it in the dark without making a sound. That was the skill I had trained over the years, becoming invisible in my own home. The shower poured out warm water. I stood still beneath it, letting it run over my natural curls, the hair Malik once said he loved so much. Now he no longer said anything. He no longer touched my hair. He no longer touched me. I remembered the first time we met, in 2015 at a charity event in Detroit. Back then, I was working as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup. I wore a red dress, my head held high, confident, with a rising career ahead of me. Malik, tall, handsome, with a dazzling smile, walked up and said, "I'm going to marry the woman in that red dress." And he kept his word. We got married a year later. Jada was born in 2018, and I, at Malik's request, quit my job to stay home and take care of the family. "You won't have to worry about anything, Serena," he said the night I signed my resignation letter. "I'll take care of you and our child. You just need to build a perfect home." And I tried. God, I tried my best. The shower turned off. I dried myself, got dressed, a simple gray sweater and jeans. Nothing special. I didn't wear anything special anymore. There was no one left to impress. 6:15 in the morning, I went downstairs to the kitchen, the spacious kitchen with glossy white cabinets and cold granite countertops. Everything was always clean, orderly. I did not allow myself a single mistake. I made coffee. The Sumatra beans he liked, medium grind, ratio 1 part coffee to 16 parts water. I had to learn to get it right after many complaints. While the machine was dripping, I started preparing breakfast. An omelet with a bit of cream, toast browned evenly on both sides, a slice of butter, 3 slices of crispy bacon. The smell of bacon spread through the kitchen, blending with the aroma of coffee, creating the scent of a typical family morning. Except, there was nothing typical about this. At least, not in the past several months. I heard footsteps. Malik was coming down the stairs. 6:45, right on time. He was always punctual with his own schedule. He walked into the kitchen in a gray pinstriped suit, crisp white shirt, ironed by me last night. The familiar scent of Calvin Klein Eternity followed him. He was still as handsome as ever. Healthy brown skin, a strong, square jawline, deep, dark brown eyes. But when those eyes passed over me, there was only a cold emptiness. "Morning," I spoke up, trying to make my voice sound bright. "I made breakfast for you." Malik pulled out a chair and sat down without bothering to look at me. He picked up his phone, his fingers sliding across the screen. I set the cup of coffee down in front of him. Steam rose, curling in the morning light. He lifted the cup, took a sip, then frowned. Bitter. Just one word. A verdict. "I'm sorry," I said immediately. My heart started beating faster, a reflex carved deep after too many times being criticized. I thought I got it right this time. He did not answer. He just pushed the coffee cup away and went back to looking at his phone. The screen cast a glow on his face, and in that moment, I caught a glimpse of a message popping up. A name in initials I didn't recognize. A, followed by a heart emoji. My stomach twisted, but I turned away at once. Do not ask. Do not suspect. Do not make things worse. I placed the plate of food on the table. Malik glanced at it, then lightly poked at the eggs with his fork without eating much. He only had a few bites of toast, chewing slowly, his eyes still glued to the screen. I stood near the table, my hand gripping the dish towel tightly, waiting, always waiting, waiting for a compliment, a glance, anything to prove that I still existed. Nothing came. "Is Jada up yet?" Malik asked, still not looking up. "Yes, she's in the shower. She'll be down for breakfast soon." "Good. I'll take her to school this morning." That was not normal. Malik rarely took Jada to school. He always said he was too busy managing his real estate investment firm. But lately, he had suddenly transformed into Father of the Year, buying Jada gifts, spending time with her, insisting on personally driving her to school. I should have been happy. But instead, something uneasy stirred inside me, a vague instinct whispering that behind those warm gestures there was more than just fatherly love. If you have ever lived with someone who is always cold to you but perfectly warm to someone else, maybe you can understand how I felt that morning. I had no proof, only a sharp, throbbing intuition in my chest. Something was being arranged. I just didn't know yet how completely it was going to crush me. The patter of small feet running down the stairs pulled me out of my thoughts. Jada appeared in her Navy school uniform, a pink backpack on her shoulders, her hair in a high bun I had done myself earlier that morning. "Hi, Mommy. Hi, Daddy." Her voice was cheerful, clear, like a sunbeam piercing through clouds. She ran over to kiss my cheek, then turned to Malik. And something miraculous happened. Malik's face lit up. He smiled, a real warm smile, and opened his arms to his daughter. "Good morning, Daddy's little princess," he said, pulling Jada into his arms. "How's school today?" "Today we're going to learn to paint landscapes," Jada exclaimed. "Teacher said whoever paints the best will have their picture hung in the school hallway." "I'm sure you'll paint the best one," Malik said, kissing her forehead. I stood there watching. The husband who was so cold to me, yet so gentle with our child. The contrast made my heart ache. But at least my child was loved. At least Jada still had a good father. I clung to that fragile comfort like clinging to a piece of driftwood in the middle of the ocean. Jada sat down at the table, happily eating breakfast with all the enthusiasm of a child. I poured her some milk, added more fruit to her plate. 7:30. Malik stood up, grabbing his expensive leather briefcase. "I'm heading out. Jada, let's go." Jada quickly finished her milk and swung her backpack over her shoulders. "Bye, Mommy." She hugged me. I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo in her hair. "Bye, sweetheart. Be good at school." Malik walked to the door, Jada trotting after him. He didn't say goodbye to me, not a glance, nothing. The door closed with a soft thud. The engine of Malik's luxury BMW started, then faded away. Silence poured into the house. I stood alone in the spacious kitchen of the $1 million Grosse Pointe mansion, a woman in a house far too big, a shadow in her own life. I started clearing the table, gathering the dishes, placing each one in the sink. Hot water ran over my hands, so hot it burned, but I didn't adjust the temperature. That small sting at least reminded me that I was still here. And then the doorbell rang. I hadn't ordered anything online, and there was no one coming to visit me. Friends? I had slowly lost touch with most of them after I quit my job and sank completely into the role of wife and mother in this house. I wiped my hands dry on my apron and walked to the door. Through the glass, I saw a man in a delivery company uniform, holding a large brownish-yellow envelope. I opened the door. The cool Detroit autumn breeze slipped in, cold against my skin. "Serena Whitlow?" he asked. "Yes, that's me. Please sign here." I signed on the electronic device he handed me. He gave me the envelope, thick, heavy in my hand. In the top right corner was the logo of a law firm, Carrington and Associates, Detroit, Michigan. A law firm? My heart started beating faster. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. The courier nodded and left. I closed the door, leaned my back against the solid wood, and looked down at the envelope in my hands. No sender's name, only the law firm's logo. I walked into the living room and sat down on the ash-gray leather sofa. Morning light poured through the large window, casting streaks of brightness across the expensive Persian rug. Everything in this house was costly. Everything. Except my worth in my own husband's eyes. My hands shook as I tore the envelope open. Inside was a thick stack of papers. I pulled them out, and my eyes landed on the first line on the front page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. A divorce petition. No, that could not be. I blinked several times, hoping this was just a hallucination, but the words were still there, sharp and merciless. Plaintiff, Malik Whitlow. Defendant, Serena Whitlow. I kept reading, my eyes skimming over the dry legal phrasing. But a few phrases seemed to suddenly rise up, sharp as knives, stabbing straight into my heart. The defendant has completely failed in fulfilling her marital duties. The defendant has not maintained the home to an adequate standard, negatively impacting the family's living environment. The defendant displays emotional instability and is unfit to raise the child. I read it again and again. The words did not change. Failed, unstable, unfit. Then I turned to the section titled, Requests of the Plaintiff, and my world collapsed completely. Requests of the Plaintiff. Sole legal and physical custody, full custody, of Jada Whitlow, 7 years old. All marital assets, including the residence at 1847 Lakeshore Drive, Grosse Pointe, joint bank accounts, investments, vehicles. The defendant must vacate the residence within 30 days of the court's ruling. I could not breathe anymore. The room was spinning. The lines of text blurred behind a veil of tears. He wanted to take everything. It was not just about divorce. He wanted to take my daughter, take the house, take it all, and throw me out onto the street with nothing. I turned to the next page. There was a list of evidence the plaintiff intended to present in court. Photographs of the home in a filthy, disorderly condition, credit card statements showing reckless spending, a psychologist's report on the defendant's emotional instability. And finally, a line that made my blood run cold. The plaintiff will call the minor child, Jada Whitlow, as a witness regarding the defendant's inappropriate behavior as a mother. No, not Jada. He could not drag my daughter into this. I let the stack of papers slip from my hands. They fluttered to the floor, white sheets scattering everywhere like fragments of my life. I held my head in both hands, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. How could he do this? How? I had sacrificed everything, given up my career, spent every minute, every hour caring for this family, kept the house immaculate, cooked the meals he wanted, raised our child with all the love I had. And now he called me a failure? If you're listening to this and thinking, maybe Serena did something wrong, maybe the story isn't complete yet, then remember one thing. In those case files, there is only one voice. The voice of the man with power, money, and lawyers. The truth inside these four walls has no line of its own anywhere, and that is the most painful part. The sound of the phone ringing suddenly echoed from somewhere in the house. I did not want to answer, but it kept ringing, persistent. Finally, I staggered to my feet, went looking for it, and found the phone on the kitchen table. On the screen, a name appeared. Nia Foster, an old friend from college, one of the very few people who still occasionally kept in touch with me. I picked up. Hello? Serena? You sound really off. Nia's voice came through the speaker, full of concern. I just received divorce papers. I said the words one by one, my voice choking. A brief silence. What did you say? Malik filed for divorce? Yes, and he wants to take Jada. He wants to take everything. He says I'm a failure, unstable. Serena, listen to me. Nia's voice suddenly became firm. I'm at the legal aid office right now. I'm going to help you. Do you have a lawyer yet? I don't even know where to start. I don't have any money. Listen carefully. I know a lawyer. He's good, and he is not going to turn his back on you just because you can't pay him right away. His name is Andre Kellogg. And that was the moment I had no idea I had just heard the name of the man who would pull me out of the deepest pit of my life, even though the road to get there would be very long and very painful. Malik came home at 2 p.m. Strange. He had never come back this early before. I was still sitting in the living room in the middle of a battlefield of paperwork. Divorce petition, appendices, legal documents scattered all over the floor. My face felt tight from dried tear tracks. I had cried so much there were no tears left. He opened the door, stepped in, and took in the scene before him with one glance. No surprise, no flicker of confusion, no trace of regret. Just smooth, seamless coldness. I see you've received it, he said calmly, as if talking about the weather forecast. I looked up. Malik? Why? Why are you doing this? He calmly took off his suit jacket, hung it on the hook, loosened his tie. Because you failed, Serena. Failed? My voice was hoarse. I've spent my whole life. Doing what? He turned back to me, his voice sharp as a knife. Spending the money I earn? Sitting at home complaining? You think cooking a few meals and washing some clothes is enough? I stood up, my legs trembling. I gave up my career for you. You were the one who asked me to stay home and take care of the family. And you've done an even worse job than I thought. He stepped closer, his eyes completely cold. Look around you. This house has never been up to standard the way I want. The food is bland. and the way you raised Jada." "Don't." I cut him off, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "Do not touch what I am as a mother. I love Jada more than anything." "Love isn't enough, Serena." His breath was right in front of my face, but his words were ice. "Jada needs a mother who's competent, not a weak woman who only knows how to cry." Each word was like a slap. "As for the assets," he went on, "you didn't contribute a single dollar. Everything is from my sweat. You don't deserve a cent." "This is our home, our family," I tried to cling on. "Not anymore." He turned away, heading up the stairs. "My lawyer has prepared all the evidence. You're going to lose, Serena. You're going to lose everything." I rushed after him, grabbing his sleeve. "Malik, if you want a divorce, fine, but don't take Jada away from me. I'm begging you." He jerked his arm away so roughly, I almost fell. "Begging?" He laughed, a strange laugh so unfamiliar I barely recognized it as my husband's. "My lawyer says even your own daughter will testify in court about what a terrible mother you are." The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. What did you tell her?" "I only told her the truth." He stared straight at me. "Jada will tell the judge that her mother is always sad, always crying, always yelling, that her dad is the only one who makes her happy." "You're brainwashing our child," I screamed. "I'm preparing her for a better life." He continued walking up the stairs. "Get ready, Serena. In a few weeks you'll have nothing. No house, no money, no child." He stopped halfway up the stairs, turned his head, that cruel smile carved onto his lips. "Oh, one more thing. My lawyer has an expert witness, a psychologist. She's been observing you for months. Her report will prove you're not fit to be a mother." Then he went upstairs, disappearing from sight, leaving me standing at the bottom of the stairs, shaking as the world around me seemed to shatter. That night, after Malik picked Jada up from school and brought her home, I had to act as if nothing had happened. Cook dinner, sit with her while she did her homework, read books, laugh at the right moments. But when I turned off the lights in Jada's room and stood looking at her sleeping face, her long lashes trembling slightly, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Sweetheart," I whispered, gently stroking her hair, "I won't let anyone take you away from me. I promise." The next morning, I woke up with only one thought in my head: fight. I called Nia. She texted me the address of Attorney Andre Kellogg's office, an old building in downtown Detroit, 2nd floor. But before going to see him, I knew I had to face another truth: money. I opened the banking app, our joint account, mine and Malik's. The account we had built together in the early years of our marriage, the one whose last balance I checked was around $284,000. I logged in. The screen spun for a few seconds, then displayed, "Balance, $0." I stared. No way. I refreshed. Once, twice, 3 times. Still that neat round number, 0. My hands trembled as I tapped into the transaction history. The truth unfolded clearly. Over the past 6 months, Malik had been quietly withdrawing money. At first, small amounts. Then they grew. Last month, a transfer of nearly $50,000. The week before, another $40,000. 3 days ago, right before the divorce petition reached me, he emptied the remaining amount. Malik didn't just want to leave this marriage. He had calculated it so that by the time he struck, I would be completely paralyzed. I ran to the bedroom and opened my jewelry box, the pearl necklace my mother left me, my engagement ring, the wedding jewelry. The box was empty. Only a few cheap fake pieces remained. He had taken both the past and the future I had placed in there. I collapsed to the floor, holding my head. How was I supposed to walk into a legal battle with not a single dollar in my pocket? If you're listening and thinking, "This must be rock bottom," then trust me. That was only the moment I realized I'd been pushed to the edge of the cliff. The actual shove, the one that would expose Malik's entire scheme, was still ahead, and it would come from where I least expected. My phone buzzed, A text from Naya. Go see Andre Kellogg. He'll help. I sent you the address. You don't have much time left. I wiped my tears and stood up. I looked at myself in the mirror. Swollen eyes, pale skin, messy hair. I was no longer the woman in the red dress I used to be. But I was still Jada's mother, and that still had to mean something. Attorney Andre Kellogg's office wasn't like in the movies. No grand lobby, no shiny leather chairs, no luxurious reception desk. Just a small room on the second floor of an old building on Woodward Avenue. Frosted glass door, simple letters, Andre Kellogg, attorney at law. I stood in front of the door, my hand trembling on the handle. This might be my only chance. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. A small reception area, a few plastic chairs, some old magazines on the table. A middle-aged woman sat behind a desk, looking at me over thick glasses. Do you have an appointment, ma'am? I'm a friend of Nia Foster. She said Mr. Kellogg might be able to help. She nodded. He's free now. You can go in. She gestured toward a wooden door. I knocked lightly. Come in, a deep, warm male voice replied. I stepped inside. A small office, a desk piled with papers, 2 chairs opposite it, shelves filled with files. Behind the desk sat a black man in his early 40s, slightly graying hair, thick-framed glasses, white shirt, navy tie. Neat, but not flashy. Mr. Kellogg? I asked softly. He stood up, extended his hand, and smiled. Yes, and you are? Serena Whitlow. Nia Foster referred me. Ah, Nia. She works very hard with us. He gestured for me to sit. Tell me what's going on. I sat down, placed my bag on my lap, my hands gripping the straps tightly. My husband, he filed for divorce. He wants full custody of Jada. He wants all the assets. He says I'm a failure, that I'm unfit to be a mother. My voice broke. The tears came again. Mr. Kellogg slid a box of tissues toward me, silently waiting for me to calm down. Did you bring the divorce papers? He asked. I took the stack from my bag and handed it to him. He opened it, skimmed through, flipping page after page. His expression grew heavier with each sheet. After a few minutes, he looked up and sighed. Serena, I'm going to be honest. This is going to be a very tough fight. Your husband is very well prepared. I know, I whispered, but I don't need the assets. I just need my daughter. Please, help me. I don't have any money right now, but I can pay in installments. We'll talk about money later. He shook his head slightly. Right now, time is what matters. This petition has already been filed. We have 30 days to submit a response. He pulled out another thick file, opened the envelope, and laid out a series of photos and documents. This is the evidence your husband's side submitted, he said, placing several photos on the desk. I looked down and felt a chill rush up my spine. It was the inside of my house, the sink full of dishes, the living room with Jada's toys scattered everywhere, the laundry room piled high with clothes. But this isn't fair, I burst out. He took these photos right when I was sick. I had a fever for 3 days. Malik didn't help with anything. He took those pictures on purpose. Mr. Kellogg nodded, jotting something down quickly. Do you remember roughly when? Early August. I had a bad flu. All right. We'll note in the record that these photos were taken under exceptional circumstances, not reflective of daily life. He turned to another set of papers, credit card statements. I saw purchases of luxury handbags, jewelry, expensive restaurants. I didn't buy those things, I shook my head. That's the secondary card in my name, but Malik kept it. He said his primary card often maxed out because of work. Good Lord, Mr. Kellogg muttered softly. He used the card under your name, then dumped it all on you. He moved to the final document, a thick report, the cover clearly printed, Psychological Evaluation of Parenting Capacity, Case of Serena Whitlow, author, Dr. Alana Crestwood, Ph.D. I read the summary and saw my name dissected coldly. Emotionally unstable, unfit as primary caregiver, Psychologically harmful environment for the child. I looked up, stunned. Mr. Kellogg, I've never met this woman, not even once. He double-checked the name. Dr. Alana Crestwood. You're sure you don't know her? Absolutely sure. He quickly searched on his computer, then turned the screen toward me. A professional website. A photo of a white woman with blonde hair, navy blazer, smiling confidently. She has a full license, he said slowly. A real psychologist. That makes her testimony very powerful in court. I stared at the screen. There was something familiar about that face that I couldn't quite place. A faint memory of an unfamiliar perfume flashed across my mind, but I couldn't connect the dots. Not yet. Serena, Mr. Kellogg said, his voice dropping lower. You need to understand this is not a normal divorce. This is a scheme designed to destroy you. Your husband doesn't just want out of the marriage, he wants to erase you. Malik didn't move out of the house. He just moved into the second-floor sitting room, the room we had once planned to turn into a nursery for our second baby. The child we never had. Living under the same roof as the man who was quietly destroying me, it felt like being locked in a hell that had walls, a roof, and a specific street address. On the Monday morning after I received the papers, I woke up and heard Malik talking to Jada downstairs in the kitchen. I walked down the stairs and then froze. On the table was a big box printed with Disney princesses. Jada opened it, her eyes lighting up. This is a new tablet for you, Daddy's princess, Malik said, pulling her close. Much better than your old one. I already loaded games and drawing apps on it for you. Jada squealed with delight. Thank you, Daddy. I love you. I stood in the kitchen doorway, my heart aching. Malik looked up, caught my gaze, then smiled, a deliberate smile. See, Serena, he said, still holding Jada. If she lives with me later, she'll have everything she wants. Not like now. Jada looked at me, then at her dad, confused. I forced a smile. Eat your breakfast, Jada. I made your favorite pancakes. But Mommy, I got a new tablet. Jada waved it. I know, sweetheart, it's beautiful. But first, you have to eat breakfast before you can go to school. Malik stood up and straightened his suit jacket. I have to get to work. I'll bring pizza home tonight. He kissed Jada on the forehead, then walked past me as if I were nothing but air. In the days that followed, Malik carried out his campaign steadily, as calculated as his work schedule. He started coming home early, something that had hardly happened at all in the past 2 years. Every time he came back, he brought something for Jada. A new doll, storybooks, a pretty dress, new shoes. He played with her, watched movies with her, sat with her while she did homework. And with every caring gesture toward Jada, he took the chance to drag my image down just a little further. One evening, I made chicken soup. Malik took a spoonful and tasted it right in front of Jada. It's a little salty, Serena, he said lightly, but loud enough for our daughter to hear. It's okay. Tomorrow I'll order food from a restaurant. That'll probably taste better. Jada looked at me, then at the bowl of soup. Mommy, the soup is kind of salty. My heart cracked a little more. Another evening, Jada was doing math. I sat beside her trying to explain. You add these two numbers together. I pointed to her notebook. Jada frowned. I don't understand the way you're explaining it. Malik appeared behind us, pulled out a chair, and sat down on the other side of her. Let Daddy explain. Mommy's way is a bit confusing. It's easy to get mixed up. He solved the problem, in truth, no differently from how I had just explained it. But when he finished, Jada beamed. Daddy's way is much easier to understand. Malik looked up, staring straight at me over Jada's head. There was open triumph in his eyes, not even bothering to hide it. Day after day, I could feel myself fading. In my own house, I was becoming a shadow. Jada still hugged me, still called me Mommy. But tiny shards of doubt had already started clinging to her mind, planted there by the little things Malik whispered into her ear every day. If you've ever been in a relationship that looks perfect from the outside, while on the inside you're being eaten away bit by bit, You probably know how that feels. And that was only the soft part. The sharpest, most piercing part of the scheme was still waiting ahead of me. One late night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I went downstairs to get some water. As I walked past the hallway, I heard Malik talking on the phone in his office. The door was only half closed. "Yeah, everything's going exactly according to plan." Malik's voice was low but clear. "Serena's about to break. What did your lawyer say?" I held my breath and stood still in the dark. There was a pause, then Malik laughed. "That sounds perfect. Just 2 more weeks until the first hearing. Are you done preparing your testimony?" The woman's voice on the other end was too quiet for me to make out the words. I only heard a faint whispering. "I know you'll do great, Alana. You're the expert after all." Alana. Dr. Alana Crestwood. My heart pounded in my chest. "When will I see you again?" Malik lowered his voice, softening it in that familiar way I once knew. "I miss you." I couldn't hear the reply, only Malik's soft chuckle. "All right, Friday night. I'll tell Serena I'm going on a work trip. We'll have the whole night together." I stepped back, one hand braced against the wall, the other clamped over my mouth to keep any sound from escaping. The woman who was going to stand in court and smear me as a psychological expert was my husband's mistress. Sure enough, on Friday night, Malik announced he had to go to Baltimore for an overnight business trip. He left the house at 6, carrying only a small bag, not his usual heavy work briefcase. I put Jada to bed early, then sat alone in the dark living room, staring out through the large window. Along Lakeshore Drive, I could see the lights from other houses, silhouettes moving around, the faint sound of televisions, families gathered around dinner tables, and there I was, learning to accept that I might lose my own family altogether. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Kellogg. "Serena, mediation is on Monday. Be prepared mentally. Their side will try to pressure you into signing away part of your rights. Don't agree to anything. We'll go to trial." I replied, "Okay, thank you." Then I went up to Jada's room. She was fast asleep, clutching her old teddy bear. The new tablet Malik had bought sat neatly on her desk, shiny and pristine. But under her pillow, sticking out from one corner, I saw the edge of the old tablet, the one with the cracked screen that I thought she had thrown away as soon as she got the new one. Why was she still hiding it under her pillow? I gently pulled it out a little. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks, the device powered off. Jada had a new one, and yet she kept the old one next to her while she slept. There was something there, an answer that, at that moment, I still couldn't see. But that night, I was too exhausted to think any further. I pushed the tablet back under her pillow, kissed her forehead, whispered, "Good night, my girl," and quietly walked out of the room, having no idea that that battered old tablet would later become my strongest weapon. The mediation room at the Wayne County Family Court was small and stifling. A long table, hard plastic chairs, 4 walls closing in, not even a single window. I sat on one side next to Attorney Kellogg. Across from us was Malik, and to his right sat his lawyer, a tall white man with neatly slicked-back silver hair, an expensive 3-piece suit. Attorney Philip Carrington. The mediator, a middle-aged woman, tried to smile warmly, to make things feel less tense, but the air in the room was thick with tension. "Let's try to find a solution that works for both parties," she began. "Attorney Kellogg, does Mrs. Whitlow's side have any proposals?" Attorney Kellogg opened the file, his voice calm. "Ma'am, my client is not making unreasonable demands. Mrs. Whitlow only wishes to have custody of her child, or at least joint custody. As for assets, we are open to negotiation." The mediator hadn't even replied yet when Attorney Carrington cut in, his voice cold as steel. "There is nothing to negotiate." He opened a thick file and dropped it on the table with a thud. "My client has ample evidence that Mrs. Whitlow has completely failed in her role as wife and mother." He flipped through, one by one. Photos of the messy house. This is evidence of her negligence in managing the household. Credit card statements. This is evidence of reckless, wasteful spending. Dr. Crestwood's report. And this is a professional assessment of her psychological instability. He lifted his head and looked straight at me with open contempt. My client only wants what is best for his daughter, and what is best is certainly not to have the child live with an incompetent mother. I clenched my hands under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Attorney Kellogg responded, "These so-called pieces of evidence can all be challenged. Those photos were taken when my client was seriously ill. There are no medical records to prove that," Carrington cut him off coolly. "And even if there were, a good mother would not allow her home to fall into such a state." "As for the spending," Attorney Kellogg continued, "that credit card is in Mrs. Serena Whitlow's name," Carrington interrupted again. "Legally, every transaction is her responsibility." I couldn't take it anymore and burst out, "I did not buy those things. My husband—" "Mrs. Whitlow," the mediator gently reminded me, "please allow your attorney to speak for you." Attorney Carrington smiled, the smile of someone who knows he holds all the cards. "Ma'am, we came here in good faith. But if Mrs. Whitlow continues to be stubborn, we will take this to trial. At that time, all the evidence will be presented in full, including the child's testimony." I looked up. "You cannot drag my daughter into—" "The court has the right to interview children in custody disputes," Carrington said evenly. "And the little girl will tell the truth about what life with her mother is like." Throughout the entire mediation, Malik said almost nothing. He kept a sad, weary expression, looking every bit the heartbroken father. "I just want my daughter to live in a stable environment," he said, his voice fake and choked with emotion. I looked at the man who used to be my husband and saw only a stranger who was very good at playing the victim. The mediation ended in failure. As we stood up, Attorney Carrington adjusted his tie and turned to me. "We will see each other in court. And Mrs. Whitlow, you would be wise to prepare yourself to sign away custody. It will hurt less for everyone that way." If you are listening to this and feel angry on my behalf, consider this only round one. They had evidence, lawyers, and even a psychological expert on their side. And me? I had exactly one thing they never saw coming, and it hadn't appeared in the courtroom yet. 2 weeks later, the first hearing was held. I sat in the large courtroom of the Wayne County Court. High ceiling, dark wood-paneled walls, long, cold wooden benches. At the front was the judge's bench, raised above everyone else, in both the literal and figurative sense. Judge Miriam Sanderson walked in. She looked to be in her mid-50s, short, neatly cut silver hair, sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses, a stern face. Her black robe fell around her, carrying a kind of authority no one in the room dared challenge. "Court is now in session," she declared. Attorney Carrington rose first and walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor, we will show that Mrs. Serena Whitlow has completely failed in her role as mother and wife, and that it is in the best interest of the child, Jada Whitlow, to live with her father." His voice flowed smooth and practiced, like he had rehearsed this dozens of times. On the screen, he projected the photos of the messy house, dishes piled in the sink, toys scattered across the living room, clothes strewn around the laundry room. "This is the living environment of a 7-year-old child," he said. "A responsible mother would never allow her home to reach this condition." Next, the credit card statements appeared on the screen. While Mr. Whitlow worked hard to provide for the family, his wife spent extravagantly: a handbag worth $3,000, jewelry worth $5,000, a single dinner costing $800. This is not the behavior of a responsible spouse. I wanted to jump up and shout, "That was not me!" But Attorney Kellogg placed his hand lightly over mine and shook his head. I swallowed everything back down and let the injustice burn silently in my chest. "And finally," Carrington said, as if preparing to play his strongest card, "we have the assessment of an independent expert." He turned slightly. "Call the witness, Dr. Alana Crestwood." The courtroom door opened. A woman walked in. This was the first time I had seen her clearly. Tall, slender, blonde hair pulled back in a low, neat ponytail, a tasteful gray suit, shiny high heels, a beautiful face, but cold and calculating. As she walked past, a trace of her perfume drifted by, the same scent I had smelled on Malik's shirt the week before. My heart clenched. It was her. Dr. Crestwood was sworn in, then sat down in the witness chair, back straight, hands placed neatly, her face professionally perfect. Attorney Carrington began. "Dr. Crestwood, would you please tell the court about your qualifications?" "I hold a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Michigan," she replied calmly. "I have 15 years of experience in the field of family and child psychological assessments." "And how did you conduct your evaluation of Mrs. Serena Whitlow?" "I observed Mrs. Whitlow over a period of 3 months in her natural life settings such as the park, shopping centers, and her child's school." "And what are your conclusions?" Dr. Crestwood opened her notebook and read in a steady, emotionless voice. "I noted several concerning indicators. At a shopping mall, I witnessed Mrs. Whitlow yelling at her daughter in public, grabbing the child's arm roughly enough to make her cry. This suggests a lack of emotional regulation." I remembered that day vividly. Jada had almost run straight onto the escalator. I had only just enough time to shout, "Jada, careful!" and pull her back. It was the terror of a mother, not an outburst of anger. But in her version, that action became violence. "At the park," Dr. Crestwood continued, "I observed Mrs. Whitlow repeatedly looking at her phone, leaving the child to play alone. When the child tripped and fell, her reaction was excessive, bordering on panic, creating an emotionally unstable environment for the child. That day, I had been texting about a grocery list, and Jada had only slipped a little. I ran over and scooped her up because I was worried, not panicking. Yet through her words, every small gesture of mine was twisted. My conclusion," Dr. Crestwood looked up, straight at the judge, "is that Mrs. Serena Whitlow does not possess the emotional stability necessary to be the primary caregiver of a 7-year-old child. I recommend that full custody be granted to the father, Mr. Malik Whitlow, who offers a more stable psychological environment." The courtroom fell utterly silent. Her testimony was sharp as a blade, wrapped in the protective armor of science and expertise. Attorney Kellogg stood and began his cross-examination. "Dr. Crestwood, are you certain you can make such a serious conclusion based solely on distant observation without ever having spoken to my client directly?" "Counselor, naturalistic observation is one of the most reliable methods," she replied. "There is no pretense when the subject does not know they are being watched." "Are you being paid for your testimony today?" "I am being compensated for my professional services," she answered immediately. "But my conclusions are based entirely on data and are not influenced by any other factors." Every question Attorney Kellogg asked, she slid past smoothly. He could not find any gap wide enough to break her testimony in front of the court. As she stepped down from the witness stand, Dr. Crestwood walked past Malik. They did not look at each other, but I saw it clearly. A quick sideways glance, a thin smile flickering at the corner of her mouth. They were performing, and they were performing very well. The hearing recessed. Judge Sanderson bent over the file again, her face revealing nothing. "Court will reconvene on Thursday," she said. "At that time, I will hear the testimony of Mrs. Serena Whitlow." And that was when I knew. If I walked into the next hearing with empty hands, I would lose everything. My daughter, my home, and the name Good Mother I had fought to hold on to for 7 years. Thursday came. My turn. I sat in the witness chair, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The ceiling lights were too bright, making my eyes ache. I could feel every gaze in that courtroom bearing down on me. Attorney Kellogg started with the easier questions. "Mrs. Whitlow, could you briefly describe your marriage?" I took a deep breath. "I married Malik in 2016. We had our daughter, Jada, in 2018. At my husband's request, I left my job to stay home and take care of the family. And what about the photos of the messy house that were presented to the court? Those photos were taken when I was seriously ill. I tried to keep my voice steady. I had a high fever for 3 days. Malik refused to help with the housework. He deliberately took those photos of the mess to use against me. And the credit card expenses under your name? That's a secondary card in my name, but the one who held it and used it was my husband, I replied. He bought those expensive things and then turned around and blamed me. I told the truth, every detail, but in the heavy air of that courtroom, those words sounded more like excuses than facts. Compared to the evidence they had brought in, my voice felt tiny and brutally weak. Then it was Attorney Carrington's turn. He walked to the center of the room and gave me a cold smile. Mrs. Whitlow, if I understand you correctly, you're saying your husband orchestrated all of this? Took those photos of the messy house himself? Spent money on the credit card and then blamed you? Yes, I nodded. That's exactly what happened. Sounds like quite a complicated conspiracy, he smirked. Do you have any proof to back up that claim? I know the truth, I said, my throat tightening. But you have no evidence, correct? I stayed silent. Regarding your illness and the messy house, he continued, do you have medical records, prescriptions, or any documentation at all? I didn't go to the doctor. I just went to the pharmacy and bought medicine. So, no evidence, he concluded immediately. And about the credit card, the card is in your name. Have you ever contacted the bank to report misuse or fraud? No. I trusted my husband. Blind trust, Carrington emphasized, then repeated it, as if hammering it into everyone's minds. Or you agreed with those expenses. He turned back to the table and picked up an enlarged photo. Your Honor, I present Exhibit P-12. He held the picture up. I saw it, and my blood seemed to freeze. It was me, in the bedroom, hair a mess, face flushed red, mouth wide open as if screaming, tears streaming down my cheeks. The woman in that picture looked like someone who had completely lost control, no trace of reason. Mrs. Whitlow, is this you? I swallowed hard. Yes. Is this what an emotionally stable mother looks like? Malik took that photo after he insulted me, I tried to explain. He called me a failure, said I didn't deserve to be a mother. He provoked me on purpose and then took the picture. So you admit you lost control? No, I just... Did you scream? He pressed the question tighter. Yes or no, Mrs. Whitlow? I did scream. Yes, I said, my eyes filling with tears. But because he... That's enough. Carrington turned back to the judge, not needing another word. She's just confirmed everything Dr. Crestwood testified to. I sat there, numb, realizing I had walked straight into the trap Malik had laid. I reacted exactly the way they wanted. Agitated, emotional, looking every bit like the person the report described. From the bench, Judge Sanderson looked down at me. Her gaze wasn't harsh, but there was a flicker of disappointment. I felt like a physical blow. The witness may step down, she said. I stumbled out of the witness chair. My legs felt like they'd gone out from under me. Attorney Kellogg quickly helped me sit back down. Serena, you need to stay calm, he whispered. But I knew. It was too late. The deepest wound had already been laid open right in front of the court. The hearing adjourned for the day. As I walked out of the courtroom, I saw Malik and Attorney Carrington standing together talking. They were laughing, relaxed, as if they had just won a game whose result they'd known from the very beginning. Behind them, Dr. Crestwood stood slightly to the side. She turned her head toward me and smiled, not a friendly smile, but the smile of someone who has just watched an opponent get pushed off a cliff. I had lost, and I knew it. If you've ever felt like you're telling the truth while every piece of evidence in the room turns its back on you, then you'll understand just how desperate I was in that moment. And if you're still listening at this point, try asking yourself, in a battle this unfair, Is there any way to turn it around? The answer lay in one tiny detail I still hadn't noticed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bed, staring at the dim ceiling, my mind spinning. The judgment hearing was set for the next day. I was going to lose Jada. That single thought felt like a knife twisting straight into my heart. Around 2 a.m, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat up and walked out of the bedroom like a sleepwalker. The hallway was dark, the wooden floor cold beneath my feet. I stopped in front of Jada's door and turned the handle as gently as I could. Her small room was bathed in the faint glow of a star-shaped nightlight. Jada slept soundly, clutching her teddy bear, her tiny face so peaceful it hurt to look at. I knelt beside her bed and took her small hand in mine. "My sweet girl," I whispered, tears soaking the edge of her blanket. "I'm sorry. I tried. But maybe, in their eyes, I really am a failure." I kissed her soft little hand. "I just want you to know one thing," I said quietly, my throat tight. "No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter who you end up living with, I will always love you more than anything in this world." I leaned down, getting ready to stand up and leave the room. And right then, I saw it again. A small corner of the old tablet sticking out from under Jada's pillow. Why does she keep holding on to this? The question flashed through my mind, but I was too exhausted and heartsick to chase any thought further. I just gently adjusted her pillow, closed her door softly, and went back to the darkness of my own bedroom. Tomorrow, everything would be over. At least that's what I thought. Friday morning, I woke up feeling numb, as if only the shell of my body was moving on its own, doing what needed to be done. I put on a simple black suit, no makeup. The night before, Attorney Kellogg had warned me, "Serena, I'll do everything I can, but you need to prepare yourself for the worst-case scenario." At 9 o'clock, I arrived at the Wayne County Family Court. The Detroit sky was gray, cold wind whipping my face. In the courtroom, I sat beside Attorney Kellogg. Malik was on the opposite side, in a navy suit, looking every bit the model father. On the bench behind him, Dr. Alana Crestwood sat calmly in a cream-colored dress, wearing the kind of quiet confidence of someone who already believed victory was hers. Judge Miriam Sanderson entered. Everyone stood, then sat. She opened the case file and began to read. In the divorce case between Mr. Malik Whitlow and Mrs. Serena Whitlow, this court has reviewed all submitted evidence. She went over each piece of evidence. Photos of the messy house, the statements of extravagant spending, the testimony of Dr. Alana Crestwood regarding Mrs. Whitlow's emotional instability. These matters, the judge said, were further reinforced by Mrs. Whitlow's own loss of control at the previous hearing. I lowered my head, my nails digging deep into my palms. Malik let out a small sigh, as if he could already see the finish line. Therefore, considering the best interests of the minor child, Jada Whitlow, this court hereby rules, "Stop, please!" A small child's voice rang out from the back of the room. Everyone turned. Jada walked in, wearing her school uniform, hair in a high bun, clutching the old tablet with the cracked screen in her arms. "Jada!" I shot to my feet. "What are you doing here?" Malik jumped up too. "Jada, go home right now!" "Order!" Judge Sanderson banged the gavel. She looked down at Jada. "Who brought you here?" "Aunt Rochelle drove me, ma'am, but I came in by myself." Rochelle stood at the doorway, worry written all over her face. "This is not a place for children," the judge began. "But ma'am," Jada cut in, her voice shaking but steady, "my dad says my mom is bad and not good at things, but that's not true. I have something I want to show everyone. My mom doesn't know about it." The judge looked at the cracked tablet in her hands. "What is that?" "A video, ma'am." Attorney Carrington shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is a violation of privacy. A child cannot—" "This is my tablet in my house," Jada answered. "I just recorded what I saw." The judge thought for a moment, then turned to the court clerk. "Connect this device to the courtroom screen." "No," Malik shouted. "That video is fake. It's edited. If you do not sit down, you will be removed from this courtroom." Malik was forced to sit, his face drained of color. The large screen flickered on. The camera angle was low, shaky, from behind a potted plant in the living room of our Grosse Pointe house. Two people walked into frame, Malik and Alana in casual clothes, chatting and laughing intimately. Malik wrapped his arms around her from behind and kissed her neck. Then their voices came through, clear as day. Alana: "Are you sure the plan will work?" Malik: "Sure. Serena is weak and naive. She will not suspect anything. You'll be the perfect witness." They talked about Alana writing the psychological report against me, the photos of the messy house while I was sick, the credit card in my name that Malik used to buy luxury items, how Malik deliberately provoked me, then snapped a photo of my face while I was screaming to use in court, the $280,000 that had been transferred into Alana's account. Their plan after winning the case: sell the house, take Jada overseas, and leave me behind. When the video ended, the screen went dark, and the entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. Malik screamed and lunged toward the clerk's desk. "Turn it off! It's fake!" Court officers rushed in and pinned him down. Alana jumped to her feet, trying to run for the door, but was blocked. "No, I was forced," she yelled. "Malik made me do it." "You're lying," Malik shouted back. "You promised you'd come with me." The judge slammed the gavel over and over. "Order!" As the two of them were led out in handcuffs, Judge Sanderson sat back down and looked at Jada. "When did you record this video?" 3 weeks ago, ma'am. That night I went downstairs to get some water and heard my dad talking to her. I hid behind the plant and recorded it." "Why did you not tell your mother?" Jada burst into tears. "Because Dad told me Mom must not know. I was scared. But when I heard you getting ready to give a ruling, I knew if I stayed quiet, I would lose my mom." The judge stayed silent for a long moment, then turned to me. "Mrs. Serena Whitlow, please stand." My legs were shaking uncontrollably. "Mrs. Whitlow," she said slowly, "I am deeply sorry for what you have endured. This court nearly made a grave mistake." She lifted the gavel, her voice firm. "The divorce petition filed by Mr. Malik Whitlow is hereby dismissed. All allegations regarding Mrs. Serena Whitlow's parental fitness are void. Full legal and physical custody of the minor child, Jada Whitlow, is granted to Mrs. Whitlow. All marital assets are placed under her control. Furthermore, this court orders a criminal investigation into Mr. Malik Whitlow, Ms. Alana Crestwood, and attorney Philip Carrington." The gavel came down. "Court is adjourned." I do not remember how I got to Jada, only that suddenly I was holding her as tightly as I could, sobbing soundlessly. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I didn't know you had to do all that by yourself." "It's okay, Mom," Jada whispered. "I just didn't want to lose you." Attorney Kellogg stood beside us, eyes red but smiling. Rochelle rushed over and wrapped her arms around both of us. In the middle of a courtroom that had just been in chaos, there was only the sound of tears of relief, and one simple truth: a woman who thought she had lost everything had been saved by her 7-year-old daughter with a cracked old tablet no one ever cared to notice. 3 months later, a winter afternoon in Detroit, I stood in our new apartment in Midtown, 3 bedrooms, warm, full of light. Not as luxurious as the old mansion in Grosse Pointe, but this time I knew for sure this was our home. Malik had been sentenced to 12 years in prison for fraud, theft, and perjury. Alana got 8 years and lost her license to practice. Attorney Philip Carrington was disbarred. The money Malik had secretly taken was recovered and returned to me. I sold the mansion, bought this apartment, and used the rest to open a small catering business. The dishes he used to mock are now being ordered regularly by customers. I had an income again, a job, a reason to live. "Mom, look at this," Jada ran in, holding up a drawing of the two of us holding hands, smiling brightly under falling snow. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'm going to hang it on the wall," I said, pulling her into my arms. She hesitated a little, then asked, "Mom, why didn't I tell you about the video from the beginning?" I sat down and pulled her onto my lap. "What were you thinking back then?" I gently asked in return. Jada lowered her head. "I was scared. Dad said you weren't allowed to know. I thought it was a secret. But later I saw you crying all the time. You were sad. You lost weight. I knew if I didn't do something, I was going to lose you." I hugged her tighter. "You were very brave, Jada. You saved me. Without you, I would have lost everything." Jada shook her head, her eyes shining. "You were brave too. You didn't give up. You fought for me." Outside the window, snow was falling quietly onto streets decorated for Christmas. Detroit, the city that once made me feel small and powerless, was now the place I was starting over, with a small business, a small apartment, and a child who had taught me what courage really is. On the living room wall, next to Jada's drawing, there was a small glass frame. Inside it was the old tablet with the cracked screen. No longer a wound, but a symbol, reminding me that sometimes justice comes from the smallest things. A 7-year-old child who refuses to stay silent, a hastily recorded video, a single moment of choosing to step up and tell the truth, and that a mother's love, even when smeared, doubted, and attacked, is still more enduring than any lie. If my story and Jada's touched you even a little, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs a little more hope. Who knows, maybe you will be the one brave enough to stand up and tell the truth in the courtroom of your own life.